Greetings as you're coming in the door here. And Mike Orphanides, if you're out there, I just called you. Please text us in. Michael, if you're there, identify yourself, please. All right, it is 57. Is your clock right?
It is right, according to the internet.
Oh, good. So we have 3 minutes here. Very good. Well, good to see you all. We have a really good crowd today, I'm glad to say. So this is going to be a very good meeting. Couple things while we've got a little bit of time. I would say welcome to summer, but if you haven't figured that out, I'm not sure where you're living or you're not in the green industry. I can say that. There is a lot going on for everybody, and I fully understand that. It's a super busy time of year, even though there's a lot more daylight. You think we get more done. There seems just to be more to do. So I certainly, myself, Kevin, on behalf of the entire board, LIAF, we appreciate you taking the time to make time to attend these meetings. Our job is to bring to you some of the best education available, and your job is to bring that education to the next level, to the people you deal with, be it homeowners, other people within your business that you supervise. So what we want to make sure we continue to do in these presentations is bring you the most up-to-date information. And things are happening super, super fast. So as I've asked before, if you run into people out there that you've heard speak, or you have a particular problem, or you hear a news item on the radio or TV that involves our industry, I would ask that you reach out to me. Very easy. You can reach me at wburnes, BYRNES, at sunrisefl.gov, or call me directly, 954-234-0540, or what is something that they just do, landscapeinspectors.org, and send an email.
Info?
Well, webmaster would have mean you, so.
Okay, or webmaster on the website, because we do want to drive and keep a lot of traffic on the website. Which, please, if you have not checked out the website in a while, it is a very active website. You can still go on, check your CEUs, which we very strongly encourage you do, so you keep up on your CEUs for the recertification period, as well as upcoming meetings. Please sign on as early as you can. When the flyer comes out, yes, typically you can go on the flyer, which puts you to the website, or you can go directly to the website. I know Richard has in the past put the next month's sign up on way early. So you should be able to sign up for the next month very early. We want to make sure we have virtual food for everybody that shows up at these. All right.
Virtual food. Huh?
Virtual food. Kevin, anything you wanted to tell them about the upcoming certifications?
Well, other than we are going to be working on a fall, more than likely, or maybe a late summer certification. The committee is scheduled to meet shortly, but we've not got anything nailed down date-wise just yet. We will keep everybody posted, and we do have a lot of interest in it from a number of folks, and we have a few certifications we've still got to button up from previous cycle. So, but we got a lot of people who were close, and I think we certified 6 the last time, so we expect to keep those numbers rolling.
Excellent. If you are not certified, we certainly encourage you to get certified. I know in a lot of job descriptions, it requires you to be a certified landscape inspector, and that's super important. At the same time, we think there's enough brought to the people just to make it worth their time, whether or not it is required by their job, but a lot of jobs do. We also ask you to keep track of those CEUs so that you know where you are, because there's a tremendous amount of help that's needed when people say, hey, I've got to get this put together for my job or for my annual review, and I'm way behind. So we want to stay away from that. Please work with us. The CEUs available. You can check the CEUs on the website, and you can, by attending these meetings, you get 1 CEU, and other meetings that LIAF grants CEUs to, be it reciprocal organizations as ISA, FNGLA, et cetera, keep track of those, turn those in. We want everybody to remain certified. We don't want CEUs to be a stumbling block at all. Okay, Michael, you have not identified yourself, but you're out there.
He just joined like a minute ago,
Okay,
so he is here somewhere.
well, we'll get him in between the next one then. So I do not want it to delay here because I want to get Melissa on. This is a topic an awful lot of people are super excited about. And so we want to give her all the time we possibly can. When we had first reached out to Melissa and said what we're looking to do, and that was to bring butterflies and make butterflies a part of our landscape projects, which all of us deal with in some way, shape, or form. So she was nice enough to volunteer. And Melissa, I think it took us we've been trying for 4 or 5 months to.
We have, and I apologize. It's my schedule, not yours.
Well, but you're the speaker, you're the person of interest here. So Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Feel free to introduce yourself, and
Okay.
we'll track questions as they come in. People, please feel free to ask in the chat box any questions you'd like. Melissa has preferred to say 10-15 minutes before the top of the hour, we will we'll start asking those questions to Melissa. All right, Melissa, you are speaker in charge.
Perfect.
Have fun.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I'm very excited to speak to y'all about one of my favorite passions. I have many, but this is one of my big ones. My name is Melissa Lackey. I'm with the Broward chapter of the North American Butterfly Association. I also have on the line here with me today for moral support the president of the chapter, Barbara DeWitt. I'm actually the secretary. So I'll tell you briefly how I sort of got started in all this butterfly craziness. It started when I was actually a little girl growing up in North Carolina. My dad was a big naturalist, and I grew up sort of on a farm out in the country, and not a lot of people around. And I found that I had to entertain myself a lot, out in nature. And that was fine with me. I was always happiest when I was, walking around in the woods or planting flowers. And I was the kid at Christmas. Instead of looking at that Sears catalog for the toys, I was looking at the Burpee catalog for seeds. So this sort of started when I was very young. I inherited this definitely, this passion from my father. He was, butterfly aficionado, flowers, plants, birds, you name it. That was his thing. So definitely inherited that from my dad. A couple of years ago, when I first I was sort of getting involved with plants and flowers and everything in South Florida, I found the Native Plant Society, and I went on a little butterfly walk with them. And that's when I met and found out about the Broward chapter of NABA, and met Barbara and some of the other ladies on this butterfly walk. And it was so fascinating to me. I had just gotten a new camera, and I took the camera out with me, and I was zooming in on the photos. And you see butterflies flying around, but until you really see one up close and just exactly all their little parts and pieces, it just fascinated me. So I on the walk, I was talking to Barbara a lot about the chapter and what they do, and it was very interesting to me, and decided to join up with them, and just became the secretary of the chapter in early January. So very excited about that. I'm a flight attendant by trade. I like to say I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. I run an outdoor camping group. I'm very interested in camping and kayaking and being outdoors in the winter. And I know one of your members, Donna Torrey, she and I met through a knitting group. So I got a lot going on. But so anyway, we'll get started, and I've got a little presentation for you today that I put together. We're going to just mostly talk about butterfly gardening. I'm going to give you a little background about NABA in general and our butterfly chapter, so you can sort of see what we're all about and what we do. And we're hoping maybe we can convince some of you to come over and join us. We'd love to have you. All right, I am going to start my screen. And okay, I have a question for all I'm seeing when I share screen is a whiteboard. Any we tested this a minute ago and it
Yeah.
worked.
Did you accidentally close the program?
I promise. No. Let me just make sure. Okay, so yep, it should be up. Now let me come back to you guys. Hang on one second. See, I got all smarty pants there and thought I knew what I was doing. Okay, here we go. Let's try it again.
Take two.
Okay, so now what I'm seeing, hold on. Oh, there it goes. Okay, we got it. We got it. Whew. Okay. So, okay, you guys, let's talk a little about NABA and Butterfly Gardening 101. I hope that a lot of you already are interested in butterflies. That's why you're here. And obviously you know a lot about landscaping and plants. So you're already ahead of the game for a lot of the talks that I give. Okay, so a little background information on NABA. We are the largest group of folks interested in butterflies. And I believe it was started in 1994, the organization, and based out of New Jersey.
Melissa, real quick,
Sure.
just hit the play button.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay, you got it?
Good now, thanks.
Can you see it? You can see it okay? It's not too big, right?
Oh, good, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so some of the things that NABA is responsible for, we're a membership-based organization, so they use membership fees and other donations to, big thing that we've just done is to reestablish the Shell Swallowtail, which was pretty much off the radar. Down in the Keys. They are also working on a Miami Blue butterfly program, which is sponsored by University of Florida. I don't know exactly where we are with that yet. We've got a guest speaker coming up in September that's going to give us an update about the Miami Blue. But the Shell Swallowtail, I was lucky enough to participate in a sort of a recon mission down there, and the Shell Swallowtail is actually reestablished and doing really well. So that was great news. NABA had a huge, part in helping get that going. They conduct this butterfly monitoring program. So they have the hugest database in the world of what species are thriving and who needs help. So the local chapters go out, I believe it's 3 times a year. We do a spring, summer, and fall count. And we provide the data back to NABA and they compile it so they can sort of get an idea of which butterflies again are thriving in the environment. And the scientists are also using that data to study the trends and answer any questions. So NABA is really a great resource. I can't highly recommend it enough. I'll give you some links at the end with their website if you want to go in and check out what they're all about. And there's just some great gardening resources, et cetera. And I'm actually going to use one of their local plant lists at the very end. I'm going to give you a list of plants. We're not for profit. We again depend on donations and membership fees. We provide grants. It's just a great organization. Can't say enough great things about it. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let me go back for a second. This is actually a monarch that I sort of raised. It's one of my releases. I sometimes will put a few of the chrysalis to the side. I'll collect them, or the caterpillars. And this one actually had just hatched. It's a male. He is resting and drying his wings on a butterfly milkweed. The way you can tell that this is a male butterfly, the two little prominent black spots at the bottom of his wings indicate a male. So let's move forward. Okay. So something else about NABA, they own, I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It's a national butterfly center in Mission, Texas. 100 acres of land that was just, being used for agriculture, now for conservation and preservation education for butterflies down in Mission, Texas. And they have had over 220 species seen. It's actually on my bucket list. I was planning a trip to go see all these wonderful butterflies right before COVID hit. So that did not happen. Not a great shot I'm showing you here, but it's the only one that I've ever actually photographed. It's a red banded hair streak. And this particular type of butterfly, the hair streaks, you'll see those come up quite a bit in my presentation today because they're my favorite. This particular butterfly uses oak trees as its host plant. So let's see. So locally, our chapter here in Broward County, we do on a local level kind of basically what NABA does on the national level. We're trying to educate the public, get people involved with, talks like this, coming in and speaking to various organizations and getting people interested. We can never have too much help for our native species. We do field trips. We go out and tromp around in some of the finest areas and places and parks and natural areas in Broward County. I personally am very into the photography aspect of it. We do our butterfly counts, which we have just the local chapter members or whoever wants to come join us, who's interested in learning more about butterflies. It's a great way. I can't even tell you how much I've learned just from the counts. I'm now one of the group field trip leaders. So I take the group out into these natural areas and parks, and we divide up into groups around Broward County. We have a north count and a south count, and we find these natural areas and we go out and we take you on a walk. And a lot of times we'll have native plant folks with us, and it's a great way to learn, local native plants and your butterfly species as well. We do actually meet in person during non-COVID times. It's the third Sunday of the month. And we do take a couple of months off in the summer, but we're getting ready to gear back up in September. And as I mentioned, we do have a guest speaker who's going to, she's from University of Florida. She's going to be talking to us about the endangered Miami blue butterfly. We do native plant auctions. We are trying to, again, put the information out there so everybody can kind of learn a little bit and get active with helping to protect our butterflies. So hope you guys can come and join us. Okay, so I am going to pause for a moment. I said I was going to take questions at the end, but I'm just wondering, I'm curious, you guys with your skill set and your knowledge, does anybody have any ideas why we want to protect butterflies and pollinators? And feel free, anybody just jump on in.
They're going to have to communicate to us via chat box.
The chat? Okay.
I'll monitor the chat box and try and get you an answer.
Okay. Feel free to jump in the chat. Donna, not you, because you already know.
Donna does not get excluded. We have high expectations from Donna. Donna said it's a good sign of health of our environments. Too late.
And then Richard.
Absolutely.
Field, very good.
Absolutely.
Richard Field said, is it the canary in the coal mine? Sharon Vollmer said, it's an indicator of species. It lets us know that things are going well in the environment or if there's a problem like too many pesticides.
Absolutely. And those are all very, very good answers and all correct answers. Just to pause for a second, this guy, he was out in my little butterfly habitat here at the condo. This is actually a ruddy daggerwing, and he is nectaring on a naughty version of a invasive lantana. And I'm going to skip right over that so Barbara doesn't yell at me. Okay, so here's why. The major thing, we need those pollinators to pollinate our food sources. It's absolutely correct. It's a great indicator of what's going on in our environment. And, are we using too many pesticides, climate change, etc. So, without butterflies, you won't have to eat your veggies. Okay, I lied. You do have to eat your veggies. Butterflies and their host and nectar plants are just always a beautiful and colorful addition to your garden. It's conservation of a species that really, it can't protect itself. And without them, again, no pollination, no fruits and vegetables on the table. I'm happy to see, especially this summer here where I live. I live in a condo, but we have a huge amount of butterflies. And I think I'm seeing more butterflies this summer than I've seen in the past couple of years. So I'm hoping that that's, a good sign. Okay, forward. Oh, and pause for a second. This guy is actually female, is a great southern white butterfly, and this is her host plant. She is actually doing something called ovipositing, which means she is laying her eggs. You can see her abdomen is sort of curved around, and those little yellow dots are her eggs. She's in the process. I was able to capture that. Okay. And we're not going forward. Okay, I'm gonna escape for a second. I don't know why it's not forwarding.
Uh-oh.
I think it's technical difficulties on my end. Richard, any helpful hints? Should I do it? Should I do a stop?
Your thing, her video.
Now, your video is running fine, Melissa. It's just the program. If you want to reboot the program, but your video is fine. The video feed.
Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna hit stop share for just a second.
Yeah, maybe.
And yeah, I don't know if it's frozen, and I am not even able to get a cursor to hit stop share. I'm hitting escape. I'm hitting everything I know to hit, and okay. Well,
All else fails, unplug it. Show it who's boss.
yeah, exactly. That's so strange. Oh, did we go? Yeah, we went. Okay, great. We're back. We're back in action. So studies show that communing with nature and spending time outdoors with your hands in the dirt and communing with your plants is a great way to relax. And I find that, and you guys are probably already aware if you're all gardeners and landscapers, um, you know, just being out there just brings such a sense of peace to me. And seeing these butterflies flying around my yard is just wonderful. Makes me happy. This guy is a buckeye, and mm, I am not sure if it's a common or a tropical. I am going to guess a tropical, but Barbara can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Okay, let's see if we can still move forward here. Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about this butterfly decline and what causes it, you know, climate change, habitat loss. We highly encourage, you know, trying to grow without pesticides, chemicals, and herbicides. We are seeing it, especially in South Florida. They're losing their habitat exponentially, and you know, every time another condo or a high rise or a, you know, strip mall goes up, they're losing even more habitat. Our butterflies down in the southeast, down in the Keys, I mentioned the swallowtail and the Miami blue are really having trouble. And there's an area down in Miami, the Pine Rocklands. I think that's where they were going to put up a water park or a Walmart or something. And everybody was really fighting, trying to keep that from happening because those Pine Rocklands, they're so scarce now, and they sustain the 3 different kinds of very important butterflies, and this habitat is basically disappearing. The Bartram scrub hair streak, Florida leafwing, and the Florida dusky wing depend on the plants that grow in that pine rockland habitat, which is being decimated around the world. Okay, so some points to remember for your butterfly gardening. You don't need a huge yard. That's the first and foremost. I live in a condo, and I actually spoke with my condo president, and I said, "Can I have a little corner to put in some butterfly friendlies?" And so I have a little, probably 6x6 little square with plants crammed in there like you can't even believe, but I did it. The most important thing when you want to consider what you're going to put into your butterfly garden is to plant nectar and host plants. We always encourage natives. You know, they're going to give you the most bang for your buck. You're going to have better luck with, you know, their salt tolerance, their wind tolerance, soil, light, water, and they're going to allow you to be able to water more efficiently. That will allow you to stave off fungus, pests, root rot, etc. Sorry, you guys, I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm a little snuffly and scratchy today. We ask that you know, make sure that you fertilize appropriately. I personally do not fertilize my garden. I put out mulch whenever I can. I have a little container out back that I use to do my mulch from all my kitchen scraps and cardboard, etc. You know, you want to make sure that you are fertilizing appropriately and you're avoiding any runoff of that fertilizer, keeping it out of the water source. Donna and I actually had a conversation briefly about mulch. I'm a huge proponent, and I was putting out cypress mulch and then found out that that's actually not the best thing. But you know, it does prevent erosion. It maintains the moisture, it inhibits the weeds, and it'll reduce your need for pesticides and herbicides. And you know, Chris, your next guest speaker is probably not going to like me very much for saying this, but weeds are a huge part of your butterfly garden. So don't get rid of all of them. I'm gonna give you a list of weeds that are actually going to be good and useful for your butterfly garden here in just a second. Okay. So by bringing in all the pollinators and all the wildlife, bees, birds, etc., um, again, you're doing the right thing for the environment. Um, we need those pollinators, and they're really dwindling. So we can't encourage you enough to plant the eco-friendly. Um, Holistic spraying practices. I actually don't spray anything in my garden. Maybe I'm just in a great location. I don't put out anything. Anything that you spray herbicide or pesticide, ultimately is going to have an effect on the butterflies. A lot of people have suggested neem oil. I don't really, I haven't personally had to use it. But I hear that, if you do, you just have to follow the directions on the bottle and, do what the directions say to keep it safe. Again, I mentioned the mulching, and you can use your grass clippings, leaves, your trim, make yourself a little compost pile, and that's just so wonderful for the worms in the butterfly garden. Okay, there we go. Okay, here we go. The meat and potatoes of butterfly gardening. So what I mean by the host and nectar plants. So a host plant is actually going to be where the butterfly lays her eggs. And every different type of butterfly has a different host plant. Some of them have, 2 or 3, 4 host plants. Some of them, for example, the monarch just has milkweed as her host plant. That's the only place she's going to lay her eggs. The good thing about planting native milkweed is not only is it a host plant, but it's also a nectar plant for monarchs and other butterflies. So when her eggs are born, or her eggs hatch into caterpillars, the eggs are already on the host plant. The caterpillar has to do no work except start eating. So it's great to have those host plants as well as nectar plants. You can put nectar plants in your garden all day long, and you'll get butterflies. But to really boost your butterfly population, find the right plants for your area. Find the host plants and the nectar plants. A lot of nurseries, especially the big box stores, will sell you butterfly friendly, which is probably going to be a host plant, or I'm sorry, a nectar plant. But go to specialized nurseries. One that we use a lot for Broward butterfly folks is the Florida Nursery Mart in Davie, which I'm sure you guys are probably all familiar with. And I have had really good luck with them ordering things. If they didn't carry it, they will order it for you. So these are a couple of websites that would be very helpful with your butterfly gardening. nababutterfly.com, naba.org, and the regional conservation.org group. You will find anything that you need to know about butterfly gardening on those websites, and you put in your I'm going to show you in just a minute on NABA. They actually have a map that you can click on, and the local chapters have gone in, and when you click on your area of the map, they've put in plants that are specific to that area that are going to do the best. So let's see. Okay, so this is sort of just a small list. I'm going to give you a more expansive list here in just a second, but a couple of things that I suggest that are good starter plants to put in your garden. The native corky stem passion vine, which hosts 3 different butterflies. It's a host plant for Gulf fritillaries, Julias, and zebra longwings. So you get a lot of bang for your buck with the passion vine. they will eat it down to the stems. If you plant it, they're going to eat it to the stems. I promise you. So it's you know, sometimes it doesn't look really pretty. I sort of substitute some flowering things in front of my host plant so that the, you know, the garden overall looks pleasing to the eye. The butterflies don't care. They actually like it, you know, overgrown and lush and tropical. And, you know, the more overgrown and weedy it is, the more they like it. Um, you know, I always encourage plant native milkweed whenever you can. The monarchs are really in dire straits right now. They keep talking about putting the monarchs on the endangered list, and you know, all the things we talked about already with the urban sprawl and the use of pesticides and climate change. I think for the monarchs, the biggest thing is you know, they're losing their habitat, and when they migrate in the fall down to Mexico, you know, they land, they have to still feed, and when they fly back up north in the spring, they need those host plants along the way to continue the species. And you know, if we keep taking their habitat away from them, they're not going to have that. My third choice would be firebush. It is a great nectar plant to a lot of butterflies. The sulfurs love it. Everybody seems to really like the nectar from the firebush. Swallowtail butterflies use different herbs. Dill, parsley, fennel are great to have in your garden. Plus, you can use them, you know, as well to cook with if you pluck the caterpillars off first. Citrus trees are great hosts for the giant swallowtail. There's a plant, it's sort of a shrub, I guess. It's called wild lime that I have in my garden. And I get these giant swallowtails laying their eggs on my wild lime year round. It's just awesome to see. They're beautiful. They're the biggest butterfly. They're the big ones you've probably seen that are black and yellow. In the beginning of my presentation, I think I had one on the start page. Let's see, sennas. Anything in the senna family attracts sulfurs, and kunti, which is a cycad, which is native here to Florida, to attract the Atala butterfly, which has just recovered from being on the endangered list. Okay, so I am going to stop share for just a second here, if I can. And I'm going to switch gears for just a minute and get, let's see, get you guys over here on the list of plants, if I can manage that. Okay, so this is a share. This is a list of plants that were compiled by the, I believe it's the Palm Beach County chapter of NABA. And this was the closest. I don't know, Barbara could probably answer this. I don't think we have actually compiled a list that is on NABA's website for Broward County, but this is close enough. And there's also, if you go to the the NABA page, there's also a page. If any of you are closer to Miami, there are different, you know, some differences in plants, but this is the page that was compiled for Palm Beach County. Let's see if I can move this little window over here. So I'm just going to sort of scroll through fairly slowly so you can sort of have a look. I will tell you, and a lot of the local nurseries sell butterfly bush. In South Florida, doesn't really do well. It needs a cold winter to die and come back in the spring. So if you plant it, just be prepared. It's not going to come back every year for you like it would in up north. The butterflies love it. I wouldn't, suggest against it, but it definitely is, not going to survive more than a season. So, as I mentioned, firebush, the berries of the firebush are also good for the birds in the winter. Let's see, lantana, always a good nectar plant for butterflies in the garden. Pentas are easy to find. The butterflies love those for nectar. And these are, I should mention, these are the nectar plants. We'll get you down to the host plants a little further down. Spanish needle, the bane of most gardeners' existence. They are wonderful, wonderful nectar sources for butterflies. So if you can leave a little sort of wild area, just a little patch where you let the weeds grow, they love those Spanish needles. Wild coffee, that's another great one, easy to grow. They love the flowers on them in the spring. I always see the ruddy daggerwings. Love that plant. So, and this, because you guys are recording it, I did try to get this list into my presentation, and I couldn't get it to paste in and be in a nice format to show you guys. But I do have the link back on my presentation if you want to come back and look at these a little more closely. Wild plumbago, host plant for the Cassius blue. I believe that is their only host plant. And some of these, like I mentioned, are, you can do anything from vine to shrub to tree to ground cover. Wild lime, anything in the citrus family is going to bring in that giant swallowtail. And people worry, they see these big caterpillars. Their caterpillars look a little like bird poop, and people see those on their citrus tree and think, oh gosh, they're going to destroy it. They really don't. They're not big eaters, so they're not going to harm it at all. Just think of it as free pruning. Anything pipevine is going to bring in your polydamas swallowtails. Again, I mentioned the herbs, fennel, dill, and parsley for the black swallowtail, sennas and cassius for your sulfurs. Let's see, those passion vines, and really any passion vine. I've had obviously better luck with the native. Any of the decorative passion vines will work. They'll use it, but they really prefer the native. They'll kind of use your other passion vine as a sort of a last resort. The maypop passion vine, I believe, is also a local, and added bonus, it has fruit on it. So that's a good one. They love that one as well. Milkweed, can't convince you enough to plant native milkweed. Grasses, palms, ground covers, all of these trees and shrubs all fall into host plant categories for the butterflies. So I think that is the end. I'm going to hit stop share. One last thing I just wanted to mention to everybody, one thing that we are doing in our Broward chapter, Barbara and several of the members and I, we participate in a project in collaboration with the University of Georgia and the Monarch Watch program. in addition to habitat loss, et cetera, with the monarchs, they also are contracting a parasite called the OE parasite. And although they are, I would say maybe 50-50 adapting to this parasite through natural selection, pardon me, we are having some issues with them being born with deformed wings and having some difficulties. So we participate in a program through University of Georgia where we test the monarchs, and that's part of the reason why I hand raise some of them. They're much easier to catch when they first hatch out, as opposed to me having to chase them with a net. Plus, my neighbors think I'm a crazy butterfly lady. But we catch them, and we have a little, it's a little round sticker, and we take the butterfly, we hold it in our wings, and we roll the butterfly's abdomen on this little sticker, and then it's put onto a note card with the data of when we first tested it, when we caught it, whether it was raised from an egg, a caterpillar, we caught it as a butterfly in the yard, what date we actually acquired it. And we send that data back to the University of Georgia, where they're studying that parasite and what causes it, and hopefully how to control it. There's been a lot of discussion about tropical milkweed, which is the one you probably see mostly at Lowe's and Home Depot. It's the one with the colorful orange and yellow and red flowers. There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not that's contributing to the OE parasite. What we found is we have a native population of monarchs here in South Florida that don't migrate. They're here with us year round. It is suggested that if you live Gainesville or above, that you cut back your milkweed in the fall to encourage the monarchs to leave and continue on their migration. But we need all the milkweed we can get down here because we do have that year-round population. And an interesting fact that I just learned recently about that tropical milkweed is that it contains the component that makes the monarch toxic. And even though other milkweed does, it's going to always go for that tropical milkweed because that is what makes it the most toxic and makes it poisonous. And the birds aren't going to eat it. The lizards aren't going to eat the caterpillars because they've learned that that butterfly is going to make them sick. So, you know, there's always mixed opinions about that tropical milkweed, but I've heard from numerous sources that we actually do need it. So don't, let that tropical milkweed scare you off. There's also a program through Monarch Watch, and we do a tag. It's an identification tag. Our local liaison is here in Florida over in Fort Myers, and I can put you guys in touch with them if anybody's interested. When we test for the OE parasite, we also put a little ID tag on the butterfly, and it's got our liaison's phone number on it and an ID number. And they're monitoring the migration of the butterflies and how far they're traveling, if they're migrating, if they're not migrating. And we've had a couple of members of the group actually have their butterflies found down in Mexico after they've migrated that far. So that was really exciting to see that your butterfly traveled all the way to Mexico after you tagged it in Florida, which is just amazing to me. So, okay, you guys, I think I'm done. I could talk for another hour, but I'm starting to lose my voice. So let's take some questions.
Well, Melissa, very good, very informative. We truly appreciate that. And there are some questions rolling in. So let me take one from the group that doesn't directly involve you. And that was a question about CEUs, which of course, all the members that attend this meeting do receive CEUs from the association. They don't need to register anywhere separately. That all comes to us. Richard generates a report, forwards it to Terrell McCombs, who's the keeper of such things, So there is no additional registration needed from our members for this meeting. If you go elsewhere, yes, there's additional registration needed, but this one you don't. Okay, Melissa, to you, the first question is, how much pine rockland would a colony need to exist?
Well, as much as possible. And unfortunately, in Miami with the urban sprawl, they're losing it left and right. NABA is actually working on a program right now. They are looking, actually, I think they purchased it, or they're looking to purchase a parcel down in that area of specifically pine rockland. I have not gotten an update on it. Probably in about 6 months, but they were taking donations to try to purchase that parcel of land to help protect those butterflies.
So it's an existing colony they're trying to protect?
They have been seen, those 3 specific butterflies I mentioned. They have been seen. I personally have not seen any of them. We did a field trip down there this spring, hoping to find some, and were unable. Now I spoke to Roger Hammer, and he told me that he actually went for a field trip with a biologist, and he did in fact see them. So that was really good news.
Excellent. Well, you got a little bit of an update from Barbara. Barbara DeWitt said that they did indeed purchase the property in Miami.
Oh, great. Great.
So that's good
And
news.
Barbara, if you wanted to unmute Barbara, or if Barbara wants to unmute anything that I can't answer, I'm sure she could answer.
That would be an IT Richard kind of question. Can you bring Barbara's voice on,
We can ask her to do it.
or?
If you can, if not, she can answer in the chat, but
That's,
Just unmute and see if she.
do we have to? So Barbara,
I-
Barbara, try and do it. I'll ask you another question in the meantime,
Sure.
and that is, what can professional landscapers do to help establish butterfly populations?
anytime you can plant their plants, even in the smallest of areas, like I mentioned, encourage your city officials. I've got it on my bucket list to contact my mayor to see if maybe instead of, putting tropicals in the right of ways or the medians, maybe, we could plant butterfly gardens instead. Anytime you can plant butterfly friendly, you're going to help. And it doesn't even have to be in a habitat. It could be, if you've got a back porch, put some milkweed in a pot. And, if you've got kids, the kids are always amazed at the life cycle and the process. They love to see the caterpillars, and, the more you teach them, the more they're going to grow up and be little naturalists just like us.
The next question, and I've seen this myself as I've planted milkweed. Happy milkweed is almost non-existent because it gets eaten like a salad.
Right.
It doesn't seem to bounce back. I mean, I don't seem to be able to maintain a population of it. I'm always replenishing. Is there a time when the butterfly, the caterpillar will be away and allow the milkweed to come back? Or, I mean, we certainly don't want to spray pesticides to save the milkweed. That's not a good idea.
Right, of course. That defeats the purpose. 2 things I've had really good luck with. What I do is after they've eaten it down to the stems, it will get a little woody. I take the green portions of it and I snip it and I stick it back in the ground. Now, typically in the spring and the fall during migration, populations are going to be higher. But usually mine does not get to the point where it blooms because they will eat it. And my motto is, we're going to need more milkweed. I say it all day, every day. They come and they won't be here for a month or 2 months. And then all of a sudden, the other day, I found caterpillars out there and they ate every bit of what I had. So, just plant what you can and hope that they will go into chrysalis a little bit early if they run out of food. But typically, the mom, from what I've seen, mama butterfly, when she comes around and lays her eggs, she kind of has an idea of how much is available, it seems.
Mhm.
And they will actually eat down the stems as well. Once the leaves are gone, they'll eat the green stems. So, but make sure you've got the nursery on speed dial.
All right, next one is a little bit more of a statement, that this member finds that the butterflies will lay eggs on the red flower passion vines, but the caterpillars will not survive on it.
I have not noticed. I have a Lady Margaret passion vine, and I did notice there were caterpillars on it. I'm not sure if they survived or not. But again, always planting native. That corky stem passion vine is our native, and it gets a little red berry. And if you just throw those little red berries back down on the ground, they'll sprout up. And they'll. What I did notice is they will go for the other varieties, but the native is their favorite, the maypop and the corky stem.
Okay. Question from Mike Orphanides. Can swallowtail eggs and or larvae be relocated by hand from a struggling young citrus tree that cannot afford the feeding damage to an alternate citrus tree?
Yeah, we're always going to encourage the less handling the better. We don't know exactly how that's going to stress out. It's not going to stress the egg out. It may stress the caterpillar out. But sure, you could, clip it and relocate it to another. I do it all the time. And sometimes I'll my giant swallowtail, when it lays eggs on the wild lime, I'll take a snip of one or two of the caterpillars once they've hatched and bring them in. Of course they're a nice food source for the birds and the lizards and everybody else, and everybody else has got to live. But I'll bring in one or two just to sort of help them along until they're ready to go into chrysalis.
And Mike kind of had a follow-up. He said, were there any tips to improve the survival? And it sounds like when you said you clip it, so you wouldn't actually pick up the caterpillar itself. You would clip the leaf the caterpillar is on.
Preferably, I would clip the leaf and just move the leaf. That would be the best method.
Okay. Rose threw out a pretty well-known fact, and that is the best survival is do not allow maintenance to spray the caterpillars. And
Absolutely.
That's-
Absolutely. I have a little sign I found on Amazon, do not spray in this area. And I live in a condo, so that's, not everybody's a butterfly lover. And the minute they see caterpillars, they're all over it. Oh, we have to spray. And even for the moths, the polka dotted moth, its host plant is oleander. So when they go through their life cycle, if you have oleander in your yard, you might all of a sudden have these crazy caterpillars climbing all around on your building, your house, your yard, and you think, oh gosh, got to get rid of those. Well, at the end of the day, they're a pollinator, and as I said before, just think of it as free trimming. They're not going to decimate the plant, and they're going to be gone soon. So if you can leave them, it's preferable.
And then Barbara DeWitt chimed in and said, plant host trees instead of non-natives, things like live oak, wild tamarind, blackbead, and plant same with host shrubs that should be used.
Correct. There's ground cover, there's vines, plants, shrubs, trees. There's a huge list of wonderful plants. NABA.org. We may have a list on our website on the BC. It's bcbc.org on our website as well of plants that would be good and trees.
Yeah, Donna chimed in with a few other ones. She said trees is the best, some of the best trees. Sweet almond verbena, which I'm not familiar with, is a favorite, and then tea bush, which Melochia, Melochia. I'm not familiar with either. But. And
Yes.
then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Excuse me, the sweet almond. It, the one in Donna's yard was, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet high. That one, it can be kept, smaller as a shrub just by pruning it back, but it has the most wonderful flowers and wonderful almond scent, and the butterflies love it. She's correct. That's a great one. That's a great nectar source.
One of the ones we've seen very popular and it's well accepted by the nursery industry and developers because it's so hardy, of course, is firebush.
Right.
Is that satisfactory for the entire life cycle, or because I've heard some rumors that that's like a candy and it's not all that healthy for them, but I don't know that.
I've never heard that. Maybe Barbara would have an answer for that. There is a native variety. It's a little less hardy, but I have both. I have a native that I got from Donna years ago, and one of the cultivated varieties, and they love it. And it's also a host plant for one of the sphinx moths. So that's another food source for a pollinator. So
Excellent. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour, so as promised, I was only going to occupy your time for an hour, so I do appreciate that. Excellent job. There are more questions rolling in, but they will just have to reach out to you or through the Butterfly Association for answers or attend your meetings. And if we do have a very active website through the landscape inspectors, if you all want to put some stuff on there, send it to Richard or myself, and we will put some links on so people that are interested or have more questions about butterflies will be able to reach out to you and Barbara and get answers.
great. And I'll be happy to, any links that you may have missed, I'll be happy to email those to you so you can put those up as well.
Melissa, we certainly appreciate your time. Very informative. Thank you very much. There's a lot of virtual clapping going on. You just can't see it or hear it.
Well, thank you. I'm, like I said, struggling with this cold, so I hope I don't sound too awful, but thank you so much, William, for allowing me to come and speak to the group today. I really enjoyed it. It's a passion, so I could talk about it all day. Thanks for cutting me off.
Thank you. No problem. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Richard, if you would energize Mike Orphanides. Okay. So at this point, we're going to have our minute with Mike, Dr. Orphanides, who's Mike. I'm going to go ahead and promote you. He's in charge at the Extension Service, and he's got a couple announcements that he wants to make. So as soon as Richard finds him,
You guys hear me?
no, oh,
No?
I lied. Sorry. Yes, Michael. Greetings, Michael. How are you?
Okay, I'm good. I'm good. How is everyone? Yes, I have a few announcements I'd like to make. So, yeah, I miss you guys. I know I've seen a few of you in person here and there. Our office, of course, continues to be open. We're doing a mix of online and in-person training. Our classes are small. They're up to 16 capacity in the auditorium, all socially distanced at individual tables. We do try to follow as closely as we can to the CDC guidelines. So if you're you're thinking about taking a class with us, check the schedule. We have a website and we have an online Eventbrite location to register for classes and whatnot, tree trimming classes, GIBMP, pesticide applicator training. Donna Torrey, my right hand here, is helping with, actually she is heading up the pesticide testing. We have up to 8 laptops available per testing session, and those are 2-hour blocks. For any license that you need, you just need to go online on our website and get a voucher, secure your seat, and you will be socially distanced. And we're processing quite a few people doing that again, and all in the Extension Auditorium. We haven't done any programs anywhere else off campus just yet. But having said that, I'm looking toward the fall, and we're hoping some of you municipalities that might want to get some of your people trained, please give us a call. We'll see if we can accommodate you and present something maybe in person in a very safe way. That's the goal here. So a couple of other things I just want to mention, a couple of upcoming dates. The 24th of September, the ISA Florida chapter is having a nice program in Pompano Beach. And it's going to be on the Florida tree laws, all the things that have happened in the last couple of years, including court cases that define the new law, when arborists run afoul, some ethics stuff about making sure that when we're condemning a tree, we're doing it with all the integrity and resolute that needs to be brought to bear, and not being self-serving about it, and try to encourage mitigation wherever you can, please. They're also going to talk about some urban tree canopy analysis and report writing for ANSI compliance. So that's an ISA program. It's going to be up in Pompano on the 24th of September. And then Palm School is coming back. It's been a while. We have two new Palm professors here, Micah McMillan and Bram Dillon, and they've taken over the positions that were formerly headed up by Tim Brochat and Monica Elliott. So we're really glad to have those seats filled, and these guys are off and running. Palm School will be October 26th. It may be a second date. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to be one of the speakers, but the last week in October will be Palm School in person here at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. And lastly, we have a new director for our research center, Dr. Jack Reichel, and he is making a lot of improvements on the facility. So when you come back to campus, hopefully you'll be able to notice some of the changes, some of the improvements, and so forth. So that's about all I had. It's always a pleasure to address you guys through the LIAF forum, and William, I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem, Michael. Thank you. And I'm glad to hear that things are coming back to life. The extension service and the center over there has been a part of a lot of our lives for a number of years. Kind of cut our teeth out there and met the older generation as they were at that time. And there's a tremendous amount of good information that's come through those walls, and I hope we can continue doing that. One I want to add, Mike, Donna put a link on the chat in the chat box for the latest newsletter. So there, as you will see, Donna does a very good job on those newsletters, but there's a lot going on at the UF-IFAS Extension Service. So I recommend checking out the newsletter. If you're not receiving that as a regular email, just shoot Donna an email and she will add you to that list. It's something you want to see every month, that the amount of information that's available out there. Very impressive, and take as many of those classes as you can, because our LIF members are top notch because they stay up with the education, and this is a good way to do it. All right, Michael, I'm going to go back to you if you would mind, since you also were once Dr. Weed, I believe, in the most positive sense. Turn it over to you to introduce Chris, please.
I will. It's very much a pleasure to introduce Dr. Chris Marble, who will be our next speaker. Chris is an associate professor of ornamental and landscape weed management at the University of Florida in the Department of Environmental Horticulture. He is at the Mid-Florida Research and Education Center, which is one of 12 research and education centers that UF-IFAS has across the state. The Mid-Florida Research and Education Center is located in Apopka. Chris is a passionate horticulturist and educator studying the growth and management of weeds and invasive plant species in landscapes and ornamental plant production. And I'll tell you, this guy is on top of his game, 100%. Anytime I've ever reached out to him with a question or a need, he's got an answer and he gets right back with me. So I really appreciate that, Chris. And you have some new resources, I believe, that you're going to be enlightening us about with regard to identifying weeds in the landscape. So Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that. Let's see, let me get my screen pulled up. So I'm hoping everybody can see that. Nice. We good there? So yeah, thank you for having me today. This is my first time speaking to this group, so I'm excited to do it. So today I'm going to talk about 10 ways, or the top 10 ways to control weeds in the landscape. And I'm going to go, first I'm going to talk a little bit about my research program, just to kind of introduce myself to this group. And then I'll go into the actual 10 methods of controlling weeds in the landscape. So we will just go ahead and we will get started here. So I'm in Apopka, like Michael mentioned, since 2014. Basically, my job description is basically weed management and ornamental plants. So that encompasses everything from landscapes to What I do, a lot of my research focuses on weed control in production nurseries. So the big growers that are supplying plants to Lowe's and Home Depot and a lot of the retail garden centers and stuff like that. A lot of my research focuses on reducing herbicide use in container nurseries, especially down where you guys are at in South Florida. A lot of the growers are growing a lot of tropicals and things like that where they don't have a lot of herbicide options. So I'm looking at ways to control weeds without using a lot of these herbicides. In landscapes, a lot of my work has focused on mulch and then also looking at alternative herbicides as of late. With all the glyphosate country that's come out in recent years, my research has focused a lot on that. Also do a lot of just herbicide evaluations. So that could be new herbicides that people are trying out for the ornamentals market, or looking at biocontrols and things like that. And then invasive plant management too. So I do a little bit of work in invasive plants, so more things in natural areas and stuff. I've had several projects. One of the big things that I've worked on is skunk vine, which is also a big issue in urban landscapes. And then small leaf spiderwort, Tradeschantia, which is another big problem, especially up in the panhandle. And I've worked on that for several years now as well, trying to manage that. So just to give you an idea of some of the research that I've been doing in nurseries. So this is one of the things that we've been looking at over the past probably 2 or 3 years and kind of focusing in on is just simple things, basically changes in production practices that growers could do to really minimize weed growth and minimize the competition of weeds in containers. In container nurseries, pots are going to have to be pretty much weed free to be marketable and to sell. But weeds are also very competitive, and they're more competitive with weeds in containers than they are in the landscape during production, just because you have a restricted root volume. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is substrate substrate stratification, which I'll talk about, but strategic fertilizer placement. So basically subdressing fertilizer and the benefits that we can get. This was a ligustrum in a 1 gallon container. You can see the ligustrum roots, they're able to reach down and get to that fertilized layer after potting. And this is Eclipta up here that germinated on the top, thousands of little Eclipta seedlings. Germination was fine in that media. That's a pine bark sand media, very common in container nurseries. But once those seedlings germinate, those seedlings do not have enough reserves basically for those roots to extend down to this fertilized layer. So essentially they stay in about this cotyledon to 1 leaf stage and don't cause any competition. So substrate stratification is another thing that we've been doing, which is kind of the same idea, where basically we're using substrates or potting soil with different physical properties, where the top layer dries out faster and the fertilizer is placed lower in the container so that we can manage weeds that way, both by reducing available water and then also reducing nutrients, where in the crop plant, which is going to be a bigger liner, has plenty of access to those, and we haven't seen any decreased growth. This is some of the benefits that we've seen with stratifying substrates, or basically layering different substrates. Kind of the same idea as fertilizer placement. Liverwort, which is a big issue. All these was stratified. Basically, we reduced liverwort growth, virtually eliminated it by strategically placing that fertilizer, and then also using this this pine bark as the top surface, which dries out quickly. Kind of the same idea as mulch, but the crop plant is actually planted into this top portion of soil, so that's not added on top after potting. And then bittercress with the same thing. So these are all stratified treatments, and we've seen about a 70 to 80% reduction in growth by stratifying those substrates and with using that strategic fertilizer placement. So just to show the, so this is liverwort growth. You just saw that photo, really eliminated it. And then with most ornamentals that we've evaluated, we haven't seen any significant difference in growth. So we're thinking that we can get similar ornamental growth and then really reduce the weeds in container production. And then landscape, so I'll talk a little bit about looking at some of the alternative herbicides that we've looked at. But for the past probably 4 years or so, we've really looked at mulch and kind of looked at it more closely, where we're looking at the actual mechanism of control that mulches are providing. And a lot of focus is placed on the type of mulch. So one of the common questions that I get and people ask me is, what type of mulch is best for weed control? What type of mulch should I use? And it's not the type of mulch that's really important. It's more about the characteristics of the mulch and how it was actually processed, because that's going to be what alters the ability of that mulch to reduce light, and then also what the factors that are going to play in terms of how much moisture that mulch layer holds, et cetera. And so it's not so much on the type, but more on the characteristics and how it's processed that makes the mulch most effective in terms of weed control. And we heard in that previous presentation that a lot of different things can be used as mulch, and all of them will provide benefits in terms of adding organic matter to the soil, providing moisture benefits and things like that. But in terms of weed control, you want to look for specific characteristics to get the best results. All of them work better than no mulch at all. So there's going to be more to come on this as I go through the different strategies of controlling weeds in the landscape, and I go over these top 10 ways. Kind of just the summarization of some of the research that we've done to figure out the best ways of controlling weeds in the landscape. So the first things first, and that's identifying the weed first, just so that you're knowing what you're dealing with. One of the big focuses that I have in terms of weed control in landscapes is telling people to use an integrated approach, and then also don't just go and select any herbicide and apply it to control weeds. Figure out what that weed is first, because there's a lot of weeds where herbicides are not going to be an effective option, or the herbicide that you're probably going to choose might not be an effective option. So things like artillery weed, which is a very common weed in landscapes. I get calls about it all the time, and people call me because they've already tried to spray it with glyphosate, at really high rates. Glyphosate's not effective for it. And then something like dodder, for example, which is a parasitic weed, you're going to want to basically prune that out. There's not really that can be done chemically with it, and you want to remove that or the plants that are there as quickly as possible so it doesn't spread and keep getting into other plants as those dodder seeds germinate. So you always want to identify it first and figure it out what it is that you are dealing with before you take a management approach. And then along the same lines of identification is knowing a little bit about these weeds. Now, I don't know everything about all the different weeds. Any plant that's out of place that someone doesn't want there can be considered a weed. So really anything could be a weed. But if you knew something about maybe the top 25 or 30 weeds and how they spread in their life cycle, or just kind of how to figure those things out, look those up. That's going to really help you to figure out the best management approach for that particular weed. So annual species, those are going to be mostly spreading from seed. And so mulch is going to be a really effective option for a lot of these. A 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch, 2 to 3 inches is typically recommended, but several inches of mulch is going to be really effective for weeds that are germinating from seed. Pre-emergent herbicides are also going to be effective for weeds germinating from seed. So in this photo here, I have Florida betony. And so it's not spreading from seed, it's spreading from rhizomes and then from tubers. And so really, if someone was to come in and use a pre-emergent herbicide here, it would pretty much be wasted because it's not germinating from seed. So a pre-emergent herbicide isn't going to be effective in 99% of the cases. Contact herbicides might also be another option with annual weeds, like for example some of the glyphosate alternatives that I'll talk about later on in the presentation. A lot of those are just as effective as glyphosate when you're talking about small annual weeds, especially broadleaf weeds. If it's got rhizomes and stolons, it's probably a perennial species. The species that come back year after year are virtually there all the time. They're living for more than 2 years. And so in a lot of cases, we need to either manually remove those or systemic herbicides are going to be needed. So we need to choose those herbicides that are going to be translocated through the weed. Now, with some of them, when they're small, contact herbicides might still be effective. But oftentimes, if someone goes in and tries to manage these with only contact action herbicides, what can happen is that you're applying a lot more pesticide over time when you could have chosen, a more effective option first. Made one application, you're reducing the total pesticide that's needed. You're also saving time and money by doing that also. And then, so here we get into some of the mulch research that we use. And so I say use the right mulch. And basically what I mean by that is just a mulch that's going to be suitable for weed control if that's the primary reason why you're using the mulch. A lot of different things can be very beneficial to plants, leaf clippings, etc. Those are great for plants in terms of adding organic matter to the soil, but for the purposes of weed control, you want to look for certain characteristics. The way that mulch is going to actually control weeds, one, it provides a physical barrier. So for seeds that are germinating in the soil beneath the mulch, the seeds that were already there, that mulch is going to be there and provide a physical barrier where those weeds can't come up through that mulch layer. So that's going to be effective for a lot of weed species. Something like nut sedge, people ask me what's a good mulch for nut sedge. And I say that if you apply about a 3 to 4 inch layer of asphalt, that will keep nut sedge at bay for a little while. A lot of the mulches, if you apply a good enough layer, they're going to be effective on those seeds below the mulch, pine bark, pine straw, etc. Also, because a lot of weeds need light, the seeds need light in order to germinate. Even a 1 inch layer of mulch, if you covered up the whole layer, you're really blocking out a lot of the light, and so that can reduce germination from those seeds below the mulch. And then also reducing available water, and so this is very important. So mulch is going to keep moisture in the soil, so keep it from evaporating, keep the temperature cool, etc. But for seeds that are introduced over time, which is really what we're probably more worried about, over the span of a year, is the seeds that are blown in, etc., on top of that mulch layer. If your mulch dries out quickly, the seeds that are landing on top of the mulch, you want the mulch to not hold much water at all. You want the mulch to keep the moisture below that mulch layer, but the mulch layer itself, you don't want it holding a lot of moisture, so those seeds that land on top can't germinate. So that's very important for the seeds that are landing in above. And then we have done some work looking at different common mulch materials in terms of its ability to control weeds through allelopathic chemicals. So some mulches will exude chemicals that will inhibit plant growth. Most of the mulches that people are going to be able to get commercially available, that's not going to be really an effective method. And so that's not something really that should be taken into consideration. With some mulches, that could be possible with some certain weed species, but most of the time when you go and you purchase mulch and you get it from a landscape supply or something, it's going to be aged for a while. And so any of those allelopathic chemicals that were present are typically at levels so low that they're not going to reduce any kind of weed germination. So we did particle size analysis on a lot of common mulch materials. And so basically, as the particle size analysis increases, so here's 2 inches all the way down to, a fraction of an inch and 1/8 of an inch here. And so as the particle size percentage increases, that's going to be the mulch that drains the fastest, because larger particles are going to hold less water. So think about adding having a cup filled with gravel and a cup filled with sand. So the sand is going to hold the moisture a lot longer than the gravel, because the gravel is bigger particle sizes. So pine straw, it has large particle sizes. It's going to dry out very quickly. Pine bark mini nuggets in this particular evaluation, most of those particles are 1/4 inches or above the predominant. In this case, we looked at eucalyptus mulch. Melaleuca mulch was very similar. I don't have it shown here, but with these shredded softwood mulch materials, a lot of times you have a lot of fine particles. And what can happen is that you have a lot of pore space there, and this can hold a lot of water, and they don't dry out as quickly. And you can see this right here in this chart. So this is the water holding capacity over time. This is the percent moisture retention. So right after we put a known amount of irrigation on the mulches, the hardwood here, shredded wood material, it's dropping off from about 34% or so down to just below 30. Whereas with pine bark and pine straw, which drained much quicker, they're holding about half the amount of water that we did in that shredded wood material. And so that's telling us that as far as for seeds landing on top of the mulch, pine bark and pine straw are going to be more effective for weed control than hardwood. And we saw that when we actually sowed weed seeds above and below the mulch layer. So shredded wood, cypress, melaleuca, etc., those different particles. So the ways that those are going to control weeds are those are going to provide a physical barrier, and they're going to block out light. And so they're going to be most effective on seeds below the mulch layer, but not necessarily on seeds above. So we've seen many weed species that germinate on top of that mulch layer, and those seeds, those roots can actually reach down and reach the soil and continue to grow. Pine bark and pine straw, they're going to be provide a physical barrier. They're going to exclude light just like any mulch will, but they're not going to hold the moisture. So with both of these, and so they're going to provide better control of both seeds below and above the mulch because they don't hold that moisture. And if they're applied at an adequate depth, they're still going to provide a good physical barrier and block out light. Number 4, use pre-emergence herbicides. So I said before that a lot of what I do is teaching people to use integrated weed management and reducing herbicide use, and that is one of the goals of my research and extension program. But one of the ways that we can reduce the total number of herbicide applications and the total amount of herbicide that's applied is by utilizing pre-emergence herbicides. So in these areas where we have to keep weeds under control for it to be acceptable, in high visible areas and things like that. A great way to do that is by utilizing pre-emergence herbicides in these non-turf areas. So mulch is going to be more effective than herbicides, but for those weeds that are going to come in inevitably over time, pre-emergence herbicides are going to be a great option. A lot of times, a lot of people and companies are already using a lot of these pre-emergence herbicides in turf grass, but they just don't know that these actually have tons of ornamental plants on the label where they can be applied both around as a directed application and over the top. And so just a few of those I mentioned here. A lot of these are very safe for use in and around ornamental plants and planting beds. And so that's a great way to reduce spot spraying in those areas. And then all these that I have listed here, except for Tower and Freehand, have caution labels. And so people with just a limited landscape maintenance license could apply any of those herbicides. So a lot of these all these can be used in turf grass, and they can also be used in planting beds to keep weeds down in and around those ornamental plants. A lot of times people are weary about using these, thinking they're going to cause plant injury. I'll talk to people and they'll say, I'm not going to use pendimethalin in a bed. I'm afraid that it's going to stunt the roots. And then I see them and they have a crew with 3 people with backpack sprayers spraying glyphosate when the wind's blowing 10 miles an hour. And so it doesn't really make much sense, because just a little bit of that glyphosate gets on the plant. If it's a rose or a crepe myrtle or something like that, you could have serious injury where that plant's never going to recover. Whereas with all these pre-emergence herbicides, you can reduce the number of applications that are needed, and they're also going to be safer to those ornamentals. Benefits of pre's. So I already talked about a lot of these. Post programs are not going to offer any residual control, and so if someone is just going in and managing weeds by spot spraying, you're going to have a lot of callbacks, a lot of weed control failures. But pre-emergence herbicides are going to reduce the total number of herbicide applications that are going to be needed through the year. And then also you want to avoid this. So I talked about that a little bit. So this is a rose that got some drift damage of glyphosate, not going to recover. That plant will have to be replaced pretty much. So you're also going to get better control of some difficult species where we can't control them easily with post-emergence herbicides. So things like artillery weed, horseweed, perennial grasses, where some of these have developed resistance to glyphosate. And then a lot of the other options that we have labeled for use in landscapes aren't going to be very effective on those weeds. And so utilizing pre-emergence herbicides and preventing those weeds from coming in the first place is going to typically be the better option. And then also you increase plant safety that way as well. Here's some data that we have that we've been working on some trials. So herbicide efficacy to reduce the total cost and the number of applications that are needed. And so we carried this trial out for about, well, this is estimated annual application. So this was extrapolated out from about, I think, 8 or 9 months of data. But basically we have the number of applications with glyphosate alone, and then glufosinate alone. So that's the glufosinate is Finale, Cheetah, et cetera. That's probably the #1 glyphosate alternative that a lot of people are using. So to keep the beds at least 20% weed coverage or less by rating those and going out every month. Every 2 weeks, so twice a month. So glyphosate alone, we needed about 11 applications per year. Glufosinate, we needed close to, it's about 15 applications per year. When we added a pre-emergent herbicide, we really reduced those total number of applications by more than half. So this is glyphosate plus indaziflam. You would know that as Spectacle. Reduced the total number of applications to 2 glyphosate plus this is Barricade, and then Finale plus those 2 herbicides. So you really can reduce the total number of post-emergence applications. Now, this would really depend upon the weed species that you're dealing with. Like I said before, if you've got torpedo grass in your beds, and indaziflam and prodiamine aren't going to do you much good. Same thing for something like nutsedge. But if you had weeds that are germinating from seed only, these pre-emergent herbicides are going to offer some benefit there. We can also get some invasive plants that can be very damaging coming in and around ornamentals. And so in a lot of cases in these situations, we would want to utilize some over-the-top options if we had to. So in this case down here on the left, torpedo grass growing up through some dwarf Yopon holly. You can see the bed's pretty clean where they sprayed glyphosate here. But they couldn't do anything about the torpedo grass growing up through the canopy, or so they thought. And the same thing here. You've got some skunk vine, one of the worst invasive vines in Florida, growing up through this juniper. Just going in and hand weeding that manually, and it's just going to keep coming back. So in this case, they could have used something like Fusilade, which is only going to be active on grasses. Not great on torpedo grass, but it's the most effective option that someone could use, over the top of an ornamental to kill torpedo grass or Bermuda grass or something like that growing through the canopy of a plant. And in this case here, something like lawn trail copyrolid could be used. It's labeled for use over the top of junipers, and it's pretty effective on skunk vine. So here's some over-the-top selective post-emergence herbicide options. So I just have some of the common ones here, and then also the weed types that they'll control. So you can see here we have a lot of options for grasses: Segment, Envoy, Fusilade, Acclaim. Grass control is not that challenging. When grasses are growing in a broadleaf plant, we have a lot of graminicides that are only going to be effective on grasses that we can control. And those are going to be very safe on a lot of ornamental plants. Same thing for sedges. We have several things like Bassagran, Certainty, and Scepter, which have somewhere between 30 to 50 common plants on those labels that they can be applied over the top of, and they're also typically safe for directed applications. Broadleaf weeds are the challenge, where we don't really have a lot of great options. I talked about copyrolid that can be used over the top of some landscape plants, and it's going to be effective on some broadleaf weeds. And then Bassagran, Certainty, Scepter, those are going to give you control of some broadleaf weeds, but not a very big spectrum. And so broadleaf weeds are always a big challenge there. That's another reason why pre-emergent herbicides can be a really effective option to prevent those weeds from becoming established in the first place. Because really with weed control, especially when you're talking about weed control in ornamental plants, it is definitely true that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. So over the top landscape herbicides, just to sum this up, With most of those that I had on that previous screen, you have about 30 to 50 plants that are labeled. Those grass herbicides are an exception where you have 600-700 plants on the label that they can be applied over the top of. Essentially any plant that's not a true grass. So they can even be used in things like LIAF and mondo grass and diamella and things like that. Pre-herbicides, most of those have hundreds of plants on the label. Like I said before, you don't have to go over the top, but you can increase the safety of a lot of those options. Two highly effective options in terms of pre-emergent herbicides can only be used as directed applications, but they are very good options for use in planting beds if they can be applied to the base of plants and not make any contact with the plant. And that's Spectacle and SureGuard and Dazaflam and Flumioxazin, where we've seen very good control of a lot of weeds with those, and those are common options that people will use. The SureGuard, a lot of landscape companies really like because they can do a SureGuard tank mix with something else, and the SureGuard, even at the lowest label rate, will absolutely control artillery weed, even if it's large and flowering and has seed on it. It will control it post-emergence, even though flumioxazin is a pre-emergence herbicide. That weed is very sensitive to flumioxazin and then other group 14 or PPO inhibiting herbicides like Ronstar, for example. Here's just some slides. I'll go through these fairly quickly just to show that a lot of these pre-emergent herbicides. So people will say, it's on the label, but I'm still afraid that I'll get injury. So the way that the plants get listed onto crop labels, for a herbicide label, the way that an ornamental gets listed there is they test it in several different locations, and they want the companies typically want it to be safe at a 1, 2, and 4x rate, meaning that they want it to be safe at the label rate, 2 times the label rate, and then 4 times the label rate. 2 applications about 6 weeks apart, and that's kind of standard, with the manufacturer. So they're really trying to get a very good degree of safety there. Definitely not recommending people apply the herbicides at high rate. But basically, what they're doing is they're wanting to make sure that herbicide is not going to cause injury to that plant under typical conditions. So they want to test it at those higher rates to look at worst case scenarios. So this is Pendulum 2G. We've done a lot of work with it on ornamental grasses, and then crotons. That's a sensitive plant. Gemini G is one that just recently added it to the label. And then this is a thing to show too. So a lot of times people will think those pre-emergence herbicides are leaching down and getting into groundwater, and they're not going to be effective because they're leaching down and getting to plant roots and things like that. So this is a column leaching study where essentially what we did here was we were looking at the leaching potential of these herbicides. So the herbicides were applied to the top. We applied the irrigation to water in that herbicide. Then those columns were split open, and then we seeded them with a bioassay species, which is very sensitive to those herbicides, to give us an idea of how far that herbicide leached down in the soil profile. And so in this case, we were looking at basically it was like a severe weather event. So these actually received 20 inches of irrigation to simulate what would happen during a hurricane over the span of 2 days. And then this is the example of the type of leaching that we got. And so you can see here where we had no germination here in about the top 1 to 1.5 inches of soil. But then the ryegrass germinated, all throughout the rest of the soil profile. So these pre-emergence herbicides are pretty tightly bound to organic matter in the soil, and they're not going to tend to leach down. Now, in sandy soils, real sandy soils, you can get more leaching than that. But if you have some organic matter there, mulch, for example, they're not going to tend to leach. So post-emergence herbicides, they're obviously going to be needed in a lot of cases, unless someone does want to pay or to hand weed themselves. You're going to eventually get weeds in there. But you don't want to be relying on any one option. You want to rotate so you don't develop resistance, and so you also get the best control. I talked about it before. So a lot of the companies and a lot of the counties and municipalities in Florida are banning glyphosate. And so there are a lot of different alternatives that can be used kind of in a similar way to glyphosate, where it can be mixed up in a solution and spot sprayed to weeds and planting beds and things. And so this is just a compilation of a lot of those options that are common and widely available. I also have here the signal word. So there's several of them are warning, and in some cases like acetic acid, that's a danger label product. So that one, Weed Farm and a lot of others with the 20% acetic acid is a lot of times the warning ones couldn't be used by someone with a limited license either. But like this one would require a lot of PPE, mask, etc. Here I have the OMRI, so that's the Organic Materials Review Institute. So sometimes people even want to see, what are my options if I want to go organic, and use no synthetic herbicides or, et cetera in the landscape. And so I have those here. So we have a lot of different plant oils and things like that that can be used similarly, and they have been OMRI certified. So sometimes schools and things like that want to use those products, and there are those available. They work, but they're not going to be as effective as glyphosate. And when someone's choosing, you want to look at the cost per application. So I have an EDIS document on this where I kind of go through examples. You want to look at the concentration that you have to use, and then the cost per application, because if you just buy it based upon the price of the 2.5 gallon, jug, you could be making a big mistake in terms of cost and not really doing a good calculation in terms of what that product is actually going to be costing you. All of them are contact action. There's no systemic activity in any of those. And they're going to be most effective on annual broadleaf weeds and then annual grasses, and then not going to be as effective on perennials. They can be used as a good resistance management tool, and they can be good on glyphosate resistance weeds, and they're a good option to improve rotation. So even if someone can use glyphosate, I would still recommend incorporating some of these into their program because they're going to be, they're pretty effective if you use them right. They're not, on certain weeds, so it just depends upon the weed spectrum that's there, but it's a good way to break up a program and to apply a different mode of action there. Here's an example of, so this is a control. This is fireworks. This is basically a clovul, caprylic acid. This is a 3% volume with water solution. So we got, you get very fast burn down. Well, some of these, like fireworks, for example, the caprylic acid, in 30 minutes on a warm day, you can come back and you'll know that you sprayed, and you will see the wilting already, because a lot of these are dehiscents, and so they're basically, they're taking all the, they're burning those plants, to the ground. So fireworks, you get a lot of burn down there. Here's a comparison of a bunch of the alternatives at 4 weeks after treatment. So this is the visual ratings of percent control. And so with all of them, we have a pretty high percent control. Crabgrass, garden spurgeon, oxalis is what we looked at in this particular trial. The problem with some of these is that when you go to 12 weeks, some of these species are able to grow back and your control drops off significantly. So and this is not from seed, this is the actual first plants that were treated, because essentially what we're doing a lot of times is if those weeds are able to get established, they're going to be able to regrow from the roots. And so with some of these, it's going to require multiple applications, and they still work, and they can be as effective as glyphosate, but not as effective as one application of glyphosate. So I recommend people checking every 2 weeks or so to see if another application is needed, depending upon the weed spectrum that's there. And if someone has a lot of perennial grasses and sedges and things like that, these options are not going to be as effective, but they can provide some suppression in a lot of cases. Another thing, inspect irrigation, cultural conditions, etc. So this is going to always be important when you're controlling weeds in turf grass or planting beds, etc. Weeds, I call weeds, they're going to be secondary invaders. So what do I mean by that? And I say weeds are secondary invaders in that typically they're not going to come into areas that are being managed the best that they could. So they're going to come in you're not going to see a lot of weeds in a healthy, dense stand of St. Augustine or zoysia grass. Typically, where you see the weeds come in is in those thinner areas that are already struggling, maybe due to a disease issue or chinch bugs or something like that. And people will often assume that that the weed is killing the grass, or the weeds are coming up, in the plants and killing the plants, etc. But oftentimes it's because those weeds are coming in and they're filling a void, because nature hates a void, and weeds will for sure fill that void. And so here's some things that are very, dollar weed, for example, are going to be very common in areas that are over irrigated. Doveweed, the same thing. Nut sedge likes wet conditions, but it can grow, in a lot of conditions. This is a real thick. This is about a 4-inch layer of pine straw there, and it's still coming up through those. So some of the weeds, they'll grow in just about any cultural condition. Here's just some other work that some other people have done looking at this. I don't really focus on weed control and turf grass. Here's the doveweed response to soil moisture. So this was the doveweed shoot weight, and then the root weight. The shoot weight is shown in blue. And you can see that when you have the low soil moisture or low field capacity, as they measured in this study, minimal doveweed growth, and then it really shot up, when you're adding a lot more moisture. And then the same way here. So this is dollarweed response to irrigation, wilted, conditional. So basically watering only when the turf grass needs it, and then daily watering. And then you've got, 30% coverage of dollarweed in response to the turf grass. So we see, and you see the same thing with mowing height and things like that too. So if you just manage the turf like it's supposed to be, and then you apply your mulch layer, you keep that mulch layer adequate, checking it, make sure that you're at least 2 inches or so. And then also when you're designing beds and things like that, slightly over planting or getting things so that they touch when they're mature, that can also really help with weed control. Just by blocking out, available areas that the weeds can land in and get established, you get those plants that they're going to provide a competitive benefit to the weed species. So another thing is, don't ignore the ground cover areas. And so there's a lot of non-turf ground covers that people are using now, just in areas maybe where turf grass isn't suitable, or they want to reduce maintenance or irrigation, or etc. So things like Asiatic jasmine, perennial peanut, liriape, small dwarf juniper varieties, and things like that. And so these can be great, but they can also be problematic in terms of weed control. They tend to be low maintenance from mowing and fertilization, irrigation standpoint, but weeds can still be an issue, especially during establishment. And so really with a lot of these ground covers, we're going to be limited in terms of the herbicides that we can use. We can control grasses with things like the graminicides, envoy, fusilade, segment. But really what we want to do is, probably if we're trying to prevent the weeds from coming in and really increase the establishment or decrease the establishment time of these perennials, is pre-emergence herbicides are typically going to be the best option. So Asiatic jasmine, just about all the pre-emergence herbicides can be used on it. You have a couple of post-emergence herbicides in addition to the grass herbicides like Scepter and Certainty that are labeled for use once that plant is established. Mondo grass or Ophiopogon, this is recorded, and I can provide these. I have several things out where you can look at the different options for controlling weeds in ground covers. But just to give you an idea of the different pre and post-emergence herbicides that are available for use in ground covers, liriape here, junipers, very tolerant to a wide range of pre-emergence herbicides. We've also done some work with perennial peanut, and really what most of the maintenance companies are applying now is a tank mix of fusilade and Basagran TO, which they've seen good success with. We also saw very good safety with it. Some other ones that people don't typically think of that we saw fairly good safety with was Dismiss and Sedgehammer or halosulfuron. So both of those, they caused a slight stunning effect, but we didn't see any visible injury. But for a perennial peanut that was already established, those could potentially be options for nutsedge control. And then, so here's the perennial peanut Asiatic jasmine, basically the same thing that I showed there. So, of course, things like phenolate and glyphosate, which is Ranger Pro, ton of injury there. But things like fusilade, which is only going to control grasses, would be a good option. Perennial peanut didn't have any injury from Basagran. So you do have some options there, and we do have some articles out that show different things for ways to control weeds in these different ground covers, and I'd be happy to provide that to anyone that was interested if this is a problem. So number 9, develop a rotation. You want to identify your weeds, know what the worst weed is, let you know what options are going to work, how it's going to, the herbicide has to be effective for the worst weed. The second step in developing an actual rotation or weed management program is knowing the turf grass and ornamentals and what you can actually use. If you're going to choose herbicides, make sure you know a lot about those herbicides and how to use those safely without causing damage to the turf grass or the ornamentals. And then also consider seasonality. So what weeds are going to be a problem in the spring or the summer or the fall. So like, for example, a lot of times you see herbicide recommendations for, February and February to March for different parts of Florida and for the first application. And that's often based upon really when crabgrass starts. And so in the springtime, having a good option for crabgrass would be important. In the summer, if you're trying to control doveweed, for example, what you apply for crabgrass isn't going to work for doveweed in most cases. So you would want to choose a different option if doveweed was an issue. So really, you just want to know what weeds are going to be your biggest problem and the ones that you're battling so that you can time those applications appropriately. And then you also want to rotate your active ingredients. And that's going to prevent resistance, improve control, and then also increase plant safety and reduce the total number of herbicide applications that you need. And then you want to implement and evaluate your plan and adjust it as needed. So this is just to give you an idea. So this was some efficacy data from some different herbicides that we trialed, looking at spurge, eclipta, and then a combination of a bunch of different warm season annual grasses. And so basically what I'm showing here, so if these 3 weeds were your primary weeds or whatever your weeds were, what you would want to do is look and see what herbicides can control those weeds, your most problematic weeds at that time of the year, and be able to apply and choose that herbicide where you're going to control most of your weeds. You don't want to just go out and say you're really battling 3 different weeds, but you choose a herbicide that's only going to be effective on one. And so then you apply that, and then 2 weeks later, you don't have any benefit to those other 2 weeds. Those are going to increase in pressure. And so then you have to go and you're going to apply another herbicide. And so you get on this wheel where you just keep applying herbicides and you really increase the total number of applications that you need. If you do a little research beforehand, you figure out an option that's going to be most effective on your weed spectrum, you can get better control and really reduce the total number of herbicide applications that you need. Like, for example, I know people, and like myself personally, I have St. Augustine grass. I think in the 7 years that I've lived in Florida, I might have applied herbicides to it maybe 3 times. I don't really have any big weed issues except for some crabgrass every once in a while. But when it was becoming established, I knew what weed species were going to be problematic. I picked the best herbicide that controlled that whole spectrum. And then by that time, the grass was established and didn't really have any problems going forward. This is just another example of a different weed spectrum, like for cool season, and some options that were effective. But the idea is just to build a program based upon the weed species that you have and not going and just selecting a herbicide because it's a pre-emergence herbicide. You want to base that based upon your specific weed spectrum. So this would just be an example of how someone could control weeds. So say you were making 3 applications per year. If you had like a really high visibility area that had to be kept weed free. So like at a, in certain areas, like I work with people that work at amusement parks and things like that, where they have virtually a 0 weed threshold. And so what you would want to do is, you look at your important weeds at those different times of the year. So like in the early spring, crabgrass, goosegrass, spurges, chickweed, wood sorrel, those might be your biggest problems, in this time period. And so what you would want to do is choose one of these options. They're going to be effective on that spectrum in the early spring. And then you get into late spring or early summer, this herbicide is completely gone. It's not going to be effective anymore for the weeds that are coming in, in the early to mid-summer. And so you look at the weeds that are going to be important at that time. It might be something like doveweed, tassel flower, Bidens, artilleryweed, spurge, etc. And so then you would choose a herbicide that was effective for that spectrum. And so basically, you're not wasting your herbicide applications, and you're getting the best control with each herbicide that you can. And you don't have to keep, you really reduce the number of post-emergence applications that you need, which is really, I think, is going to be the most important, especially in Florida when we get into the summer and the fall. We lose a lot of our post-emergence herbicide options because of the heat. And so the better that we can do early in the year with our cultural practices and then like timely pre-emergence herbicide applications, the better that will be throughout the rest of the year. So this would just be an example of an annual control program. This is not a recommendation. This is just just to give you an idea of how to select herbicides based upon different weeds at different times of the year. The idea is just to know your weeds and then to base your program based upon your specific situation or the situation specific properties that you're managing, and not just using these slurries that I see people making and applying to every place that they go to, and often have failures and things. It takes a lot more time up front, but the people that have done this have typically reported much better results and savings overall. And then Tim, combined tactics, always focus on integrated weed management. I talked a lot about herbicides in this, but really that's lower on the priority list. The cultural practices, things like mulch, proper planting, picking the right plant for the right place, that's really going to be the best defense against weeds. Then the herbicides come in when everything else fails. And especially when we get those perennial weeds where we don't really have good cultural controls for them. And then we want to rotate herbicides, not rely too heavily on any one active, and choose the best herbicide for our situation so we get the most bang for our buck out of every herbicide that we apply. That's all that I have. I know I went through that kind of quick. I'll leave you with this. So this is in a world full of pansies, be a dandelion, a little cartoon there. But any questions anybody has, of course, y'all got great extension folks down there. They can answer anything. My email is up here on this chart here. So feel free, if I can ever help or send anything or whatever, I'm happy to do that. And I will open the floor up for any questions that might be there. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Chris, that was excellent presentation. A tremendous amount of information you just put across there. Kevin, who I'm with, decided to just start taking pictures of the screen. It was easier to try to write it down or digest it.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I can give a PDF, and I know I went through that fast, and it seems like, and especially it's weird hearing somebody with a Southern accent like me talk as fast as I do. But I think it's a Zoom thing. But anyways, I'll send a PDF of all the slides and give it to you, and then anybody in your group that wants it can have a copy of it.
I appreciate that very much. And we've got a minute or two, and I do have a couple questions. First one's coming from me because it's one I was curious about. I was always taught, glyphosate being a slow-acting systemic herbicide, and you should not mix it with a quick knockdown. But one of the hottest selling items out there right now is Roundup with a paraquat or something that's
Diquat.
Works. Why are paraquat, we used to use it, not burnt out in one day, and Roundup took so long to get in to do the systemic thing.
Right. So yeah. So they've kept. I mean, the companies that make those, they've gotten to where they can. They don't really reduce the efficacy of it that much. But we did research when I was at Auburn, and the Roundup Quick Pro with Diquat. And so with some weed species, you do see reduced efficacy with that. But what you really want to do is that low, amount of the contact so that you still get that fast burn down, but you get the systemic activity. And inevitably what will happen, especially with some species, is is that you get the burn down and you don't get the systemic activity, or that systemic activity is reduced. And so with some species, we have seen an antagonistic effect where we're seeing reduced control with those. So what I typically recommend is, I mean, you're going to get good control if it's like I can see where it might be useful to use something like that if someone was managing at a you know, at a amusement park or someplace where they wanted, you know, they wanted to have that fast knockdown. But in most landscape situations, I don't see much benefit for it. So
The material I've seen comes prepackaged.
Right.
Can you tank mix your own Roundup and Contact, or is that?
you
not a
can,
good-
you can, and I usually see better results with the pre-package just because a lot of people don't mix it correctly and go way too high on the dicot rate. And so that's what you don't want to do, is go too high on the contact, because that's what's reducing the effect of the glyphosate. And so the pre-mixed version, or mixing it about that rate, is going to be best. And I forget what that ratio is, but they've gotten better with it. And the mixes that have been out later, I mean, there's been research that people have done where they've seen pretty good results, especially with annual species with those. Yeah, the problem when people are mixing it themselves is they often go real high on the dicot, and it reduces the control.
Mhm. One other one, you also mentioned there's a list of glyphosate resistant weeds. Is that list available somewhere?
So if you wanted a list of glyphosate resistant weeds, the best place to go would be probably hrac.org. So that's the Herbicide Resistance Action Committee. And then you can click on any herbicide and see all the weeds that have developed resistance to each active ingredient, and then also different classes of herbicides. And then, you know, there's some that have developed resistance to multiple classes where they have multiple resistance, but that's probably the best place to go to find a comprehensive list of that.
It was HTRAC? What
Yeah,
was it?
if you Google Herbicide Resistance Action Committee, that website will come up. I think it's HRAC.org, but it could be .net or .com, but I think it's .org.
I think it's this one, hracglobal.com.
And then Mike had a question for you real quick. Yep, and Richard just posted, Richard Secor posted, for those of you looking at the chat box, he posted it on there. Mike said, Chris, we're having a lot of problems managing tropical signal grass in recent years in both turf and ornamentals. Any thoughts on management of this? Wow, Mike, big word. Weed, pernicious? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's, and I'm not going to be much help on the turf grass side. So I mean, there's pre-emergence herbicides that can work fairly well, but like when you get into something like St. Augustine, which might be the issue, you don't really have a lot. And sports fields turf, and again, this is not my area, but manuscript, which is panoxidine, I forget, but it's a graminicide, a group 1 herbicide that came out recently, and a lot of the golf course managers that I've talked to have seen good success with it. But I think Bermuda grass might be the only warm season grass that's labeled, in maybe zoysia also. But I mean, in planting beds and stuff, if you can apply glyphosate to it, that would suffice typically. But it's when it gets into St. Augustine grass, it's like you know, crabgrass, but harder to control. And there's not a lot of great options post-emergence. So,
Excellent. Well, Chris, I thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I think the entire membership got a great deal out of this, tremendous amount of information. Again, good to know you're out there. Don't be surprised if you start seeing emails from a number of our members that have some more questions for you.
sure, absolutely.
You're a wealth of information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
For the rest of membership, it's not quite, it's just 3:01. So I want to real quick before I let you go, remind you of a couple things. Every month I remind you dues, and we're getting so far into the year that Richard just reminded me that we've actually had some inquiries from some municipalities that moving forward, that they are already looking to pay for next year's dues. So I applaud those people thinking that far in advance. And anybody that has not paid, again, I got to bring it up, please pay your dues for 2021. The other, as I've told you in past months, we are still planning the seminar for this year. We are running very behind on it, mostly because I am currently very close to retirement, 162 days. And as moving forward, my wife and I, Mary Kay and I, are selling our house. So if you've ever sold a house, it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. So I'm running way behind, but we are going to pull off a seminar this year. And as I mentioned before, it's going to be 2 half days, 1 half virtual day and the other half day in a park, especially as some of these variants of COVID come back. I think that'll be very timely and we'll be able to keep everyone safe and sound. That's it for this month. Thank you very much. You'll be able to sign up for next month's, probably by tomorrow. Richard will have that link up. So get on for next month's meeting. And Kevin, anything? You're good?
Not for me, just working on committee, certification committee, still plugging away.
And if anyone has any interest in getting involved with LIAF, we're still accepting all the volunteer hours you can scrap together here. All right, thank you all. Have a very good month. Remain safe. Please take your health seriously. Do everything you can to stay healthy and safe. All right, see you next month.